The Senate Intelligence Committee held their first hearing into the Russian efforts to influence the election last week. Joining us now is the Assistant Majority Leader, Senator John Cornyn, who sits on that committee. Welcome, Senator. I want to start with something the President said about the investigation into Russian interference in the election and any ties with his campaign. He said it's a witch hunt. Is the Senate Intelligence Committee engaged in a witch hunt?
We're doing a bipartisan investigation, thanks to the great leadership of Senator Burr, our chairman, and our vice chairman, Senator Mark Warner, and leaders like Angus King, who I think you'll be hearing from shortly. We're trying to avoid the distractions outside of the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation. We are well underway, getting unprecedented access to raw intelligence from the intelligence community to get to the bottom of this. We want to understand the extent to which Russia has attempted to influence and interfere in our elections and to undermine our democracy, and also to look at things like unprecedented, perhaps illegal leaks of classified information.
I want to get to that question of leaks in a minute, but this question of whether there are any ties to the Trump campaign, that's a legitimate area of inquiry, and the committee's engaged in that. It's not a witch hunt.
It is a legitimate area of inquiry. Former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said earlier last month that there was no evidence of collusion, with the parties and their allies spending $5 billion in the last general election for president. You'll have to put that into the proper context to see what kind of impact it actually had. But there's no question that Putin is trying to undermine our democracy and undermine public confidence in our institutions.
Michael Flynn requested immunity. This is the former National Security Advisor, requested immunity or protection from the committee. You were a former district court judge. What does that mean to you when somebody asks for protection?
Well, it means they think that they might have some liability, from a legal standpoint. It's not uncommon, but I think it's premature. I agree with Mark Warner, Senator Warner, and others who said we need to get to the bottom, get as much background as we possibly can, and there's 20 different witnesses that have agreed to cooperate with the committee in addition to viewing the raw intelligence. And at some point, we may want to talk to General Flynn.
Do you have any idea when that point would be that the committee would make a choice on immunity, just when it kind of gets the whole information enough to make a judgment?
I think it's too early to say. It's going to be, we need to get the context and a lot of the detail before we talk to some of those witnesses, particularly ones who are requesting immunity.
The president also commented on this question of the request for immunity. Should he be, as a president of the executive branch, commenting about these investigations and about what the Senate's up to? Obviously it's his right as an American to do that, but do you think that's a good idea?
Well, it is the president's right to do it. Sometimes I think this is a distraction from what we should be doing, and we're trying our best in the Senate Intelligence Committee to keep our focus like a laser on this bipartisan investigation.
To the question of leaks and what the House Intelligence Chairman has brought up, this idea of unmasking possible Trump associates as a part of surveillance that was done. A very serious issue. It seems to be getting a little mixed. Should there be a separate inquiry into that, which is kind of separate from this question of Russian influence in the election and any ties to the Trump campaign, in order to keep the two separate, both serious issues, but not necessarily connected? They kind of keep getting muddled back and forth.
I do think they are connected, and they both will be the subject of our inquiry on the Senate Intelligence Committee. Obviously, anytime anybody jeopardizes the privacy rights of an American citizen and as part of a intelligence gathering process that would be unauthorized and then leaks that information, that's potentially a crime, and that's something we ought to pursue.
Would you like to see the reports the White House has that they've shown Chairman Nunes in the House and also Ranking Member Schiff in the House? Would you like to see those?
I would. And Senator Burr, Senator Warner have sent a letter to the White House asking them to have the intelligence community with which we could deal with directly on a regular basis produce that rather than getting it directly from the White House.
Switching to the Supreme Court nominee, Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader, says he's got the votes to filibuster Neil Gorsuch. So will Republicans change the Senate rules?
Well, John, this is unprecedented in American history, a partisan filibuster of a Supreme Court nominee. And unfortunately, this is the culmination of the escalation that began back when George W. Bush was president, where Senator Schumer and others, liberal activists, came up with this strategy to try to block through the filibuster the confirmation of judges. It is theoretically possible, had been through our nation's history, never happened before the George W. Bush administration. And so Neil Gorsuch, I think, is the kind of nominee that our Democratic friends really haven't been able to find any real fault with, except that he was nominated by this president. And they realized that this is their last gasp to try to prevent him from being confirmed. But they won't, and Judge Gorsuch will be confirmed this week one way or another. I hope the Democrats will provide the 60 votes, and we don't have to worry about the change of rules.
But in 1968, Republicans did filibuster Abe Fortas. Your point is that it wasn't a purely partisan filibuster. So in terms of the history of the Senate, this has been done before. What would be new is if you change the rules.
Well, what would be different is if it were successful. Abe Fortas' nomination was withdrawn at his own request 4 days into the debate, and he resigned from the Supreme Court for ethical reasons. So it's not precedent, in my view, for what's happening now. This is an unprecedented escalation by Senator Schumer and Senate Democrats to deny the president the right he has to nominate and to have advice and consent on his nomination, particularly one this quality. If they filibuster Neil Gorsuch, they're going to filibuster everyone that this president might propose.
All right, Senator John Cornyn, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, John.